Hello and welcome to the inaugural New Moon Tarot reading for the 24th of January 2020, and I am Sarah Taylor of Integrated Tarot. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the way that I read, I thought I'd give you a little rundown, not too long, just about the emphasis that I take with my readings. They may be slightly different from other tarot readings that you're used to, in as much as I'm not particularly interested in what's happening in the future, though that will come up, obviously, because it is a tarot reading for January. But I'm much more interested in what is going on right now, both outside of you, but more importantly, inside you, because what is going on inside in your heart, in your mind, so in other words, in your emotions and feelings and in your psyche, will very much impact the way that you experience the world, and also how the world experiences you, and then how the world responds or reacts to you in turn. So it very much is an inside job when it comes to interfacing with the world. Our attitude very much determines our experience of things. And so if we have a little bit of an extra insight into what's going on inside and how we can possibly shed some light on those darker corners inside, then maybe we can also bring something new, something more, and perhaps something different for us out into the world, which then in turn may reflect something different back to us. I think that this is particularly important right now, which is why I am starting up these readings, because in a world of information, misinformation and disinformation, I think that one of the things that we can consistently rely on if we continue to exercise it as a muscle is our own intuition, our own judgment. And it becomes increasingly difficult to do that when we have so many ways of finding out things that are going on, or having people tell us what to do or how to think, that our opinions are in some way wrong, or maybe they are right and then therefore we shouldn't change them. There are so many social media, to the media, to the internet itself, to our peer groups and our colleagues and our families particularly, who are also in turn influenced by this great sort of structure of information that is rising up around us, that all of those things are going to be impacting us all the time. And I think that sometimes it's worth just considering our levels of our own integrity with ourselves, which may look very different from what other people would like us to be or would hope us to be, may also look very different from the way that we thought we were. But to have those levels of integrity feed our decision making, feed our actions throughout, because that is a way, really the aim here is not to change the world, but to change our being in the world, and to grow a steady and strong foundation, which I think is particularly needed at this time. So I decided to start up a tarot reading that is very much inward focused, and I thought the new moon would be a time to bring this out, simply because the new moon is about sowing new seeds. It's sowing new seeds for the next lunar month. It's the darkness of the moon, and when the darkness is around and there isn't the full moon that's lighting the way, then we really do have to feel into our intuition a lot more. It can feel quite it can feel a very introspective time, a very thoughtful time. It can feel a somewhat uncertain time. It's amazing how we can go in sync with the patterns of nature and our own thoughts and our behaviors very much are often in tune with the moon. So I thought that having this lack of light at night is a way of then using a different way of feeling into what's going on, and perhaps being able to pick up on more subtle currents. And the more that we can pick up on those, the more we can identify them then when they're there, and then the more that we can actually use them in our own lives. And by those subtle currents, I really mean our own connection to our intuition, whatever that looks like, however it is for us, however we choose to connect to it, whatever voice it has for us, whether it comes to us in images or in a whisper or in sensations. There are many, many different ways that our intuition speaks to us from person to person. And I really think it's important, perhaps critical at times in a world like this at the moment, to be able to turn to a different kind of wisdom, a wisdom that is your own, and that is ancient, older than you are. So welcome to the New Moon Tarot reading. I am going to draw 3 cards. It will always be a 3-card reading, unless of course there is a qualifying card that I feel needs to be drawn. And the way that it works is that I will draw from left to right. I haven't seen the cards myself. I've shuffled the deck. I'm going to draw them left to right. And the first card on the left is what we are bringing in. So it's our foundation. It's something that's already happened, in the process of happening, that is in some way influencing what is going on right now. And then the center card, the card in the middle, is the right now card. It's really going to be the prevailing weather for the next four weeks. The prevailing psychic weather, emotional weather, psychological weather, whether that's coming up from inside you, feels like it's coming up inside you because you can't really identify it out in the world, or it feels like it's coming at you from outside, whether from a situation or from a person or an organization, however loosely that is defined. I don't necessarily mean a company, though it could be your place of work. But yes, so it could come up from inside, it could come up from outside, but it will become obvious to you in one way or another what it is that this middle card is. And then the final card, which is the one that I kind of, it's the reading's gift back to you, is the agency card, the card that you use in order to be able to make an impact on your surroundings. I'm not interested in tarot readings that simply tell you what's going to happen and tell you what to do. This is more of a card that gives you a particular piece of equipment or a tool so that you can use it in the way that you feel best. It can be best employed in order to have an impact on your surroundings, whether that is to go with the flow, if that central card, that theme card, is something that you want to harness, or to mitigate that central card if it's something that you really feel that you would rather, I don't know, avoid, but rather not have you hit in full force. A way of facing it with full responsibility, but with a sense of being able to do something about the circumstances that you're facing. So I am now going to draw the 3 cards, and I'm going to turn them over and read them one by one. And there will, at the end, I will then put all 3 together as a cohesive reading. And we'll see what that reading's about for this month, which has already been pretty tumultuous from a political perspective, and also from a climate perspective, and also from an astrological perspective. I am informed by astrology. I don't really use it in my readings. I may sometimes refer to signs. I may sometimes refer to houses, but for the most part, I will very much be working with the symbolism of the cards themselves. So this is the foundational card. This is something, it's not going to happen. It is happening or has happened, but but if it has already happened, it is still having a significant enough impact that it then intersects with the current climate card as well. So we'll see what that is. So the card here that you are seeing is satiety. It's the 10 of Cups. That's the foundational card. It's an interesting one from a foundational point of view because it is a 10, and if you go with the way that the minor arcana, I see the way that it works, it does work very much that the numbers are significant, and the 10 is the last numbered card in the suits. Therefore, for me, it is the end of something or the culmination of something. And here it is the culmination of satiety. So if I look at the card, because Carl Roehrig took painstaking amount of time to often write on his cards. If I put that up, you'll be able to see a little bit what I mean. Can't particularly ignore the breast that's there as well, and that will be getting to as well, because that is something that's going to be featuring symbolically. But so satiety here, satisfaction and fulfillment. So it is the coming together, and it's cups. So it's watery, it's emotional, it's to do with feelings. It's also to do with the uprising of sensation. It's a watery or embodied sensation from the unconscious, but it very often makes itself known through our feelings. So cups are feelings. Ten of Cups is the culmination of a certain feeling, and it's the Ten of Cups is viewed as a very positive card. It is that being filled up, and if you look and we go to the breast there, that in terms of from a psychological perspective, the breast is the mother, the caregiver, the sustenance, nourishment, everything that we need in order to live. So there is here a sense of being full up with what we need. We are full to the brim, in the same way that a baby suckling at a breast or at a bottle will at some point turn away because they've had enough, and they normally have quite a sort of spaced out look on their faces. They ready for sleep, and they've had an elegant sufficiency, as we say over here. So the Ten of Cups is something about being full up. Now, to take it in its less positive connotation, it's also about having had enough of something. So if the Ten of Cups is sort of pushed to a particular extreme, and it itself is already at the end of the line, then there could also be a sense of having had something up to here. I've had it up to here. I've had enough of that now. It now needs to change. And that would be in terms of feelings, a particular emotion. You can have too much of a good thing. You can also have too much of an upwelling of emotion of a particular kind, there comes a point where rationality needs to take over, or you need to have a break or time out. And so that particular phase, satiety, is ending. I mean, the first thing I'm thinking of is the festive season for a lot of us around the world. And I know that many of us come out of Christmas and New Year thinking, oh my goodness, ate far too much, possibly drank a bit too much, need to get to the gym, need to start eating better, all of that kind of thing. And the Ten of Cups can really be that, a little bit too much of mother's milk. A little bit too much entertainment. So it's just that sense of needing to move on now. It's gone as far as it can go, in other words. This particular thing that you're reaching for, if it felt amazing and you want more of it, that's pretty much it. That's it for now, in that particular form in which you experienced it. If it's not something that felt entirely amazing, and it may have just been up to here, it's also changing. It's changing form right now. So that's the foundation. And what we are going into, what this foundation is bringing us into in the current weather is, well, you couldn't think of a better card as a beginning card, could you? You go from a 10 to the 1, and the 1 of the major arcana, which are the big soul cards. I'm going to just explain for those of you who are really not that familiar with tarot what the major is and how it's different from the minor. But this is 1. The cards in the majors, there are 22 cards. They start at 0, which is the Fool, and they end at 21, which is the World. And the Magus is the first sort of, well, the 0 is everywhere and it's nowhere at the same time. The Fool is the field of potential. It is a sort of absolute potential. It is eternal potential. It is the stepping out and then to turn that potential into something material. But this is from the soul's point of view. And when I say soul, that can sound pretty intangible, but what I really mean from the perspective that I read is, in other words, it is the deeper agenda of your own life that life has for you. It is not the agenda that other people are telling you that you ought to have. It's not even the agenda that sometimes you think that you should have or that you want to have. The soul will frequently have a different agenda from the one that we think it is, or others want for us, or sometimes a different agenda from the one that we would prefer to have. It can sometimes call us into unfamiliar places. But if we are getting called into unfamiliar places because we have now had enough, or we're full up, we are sated with something, and it's time to shift into a different way of being, then the Magus is the best card really for that, because he is the magician. So when you think of the Magus in the major arcana sense of the word, and we're talking about the soul's journey, the way that we experience life through the prism of our own integrity, I think that that's really it. It comes back to integrity again. The Magus is the go-getter. He's the doer. He is the one that goes out and gets things done. So he makes something out of nothing. So he makes the one from the zero. And in that way, then, it is about creating something out of perhaps seemingly nothing. If we have the end of the Ten of Cups, we have a very good grounding of a particular thing, but then we've understood that that thing that filled us up, it's no longer that source is getting, it may not get turned off, but it's getting diverted elsewhere. So we now can take what we've been given and use it in some way. And we do that by creating, we do that by making into tangible form something that was previously not tangible. We are busy trying to shape our world and bring it into existence. So at the beginning of January, it's a fantastic card. Well, not the beginning of January, but the beginning of the year. It's a great card to really start off the year. It empowers us to be able to shift something. So this is the weather that you're moving into. Now, the Magus being a major arcana card, it may come at you from outside in the form of another person, in the form of an offer, in the form of a venture of some kind. But it will, if it comes from outside, it will require your input. It will require your time and your energy and your commitment. It will require a certain entrepreneurial flair. And use that the term entrepreneurial, again, loosely. I'm not necessarily talking about having to find money to start up a business, but really it's about working with what you have in order to create something more. And those resources may not necessarily be financial. And quite frankly, after Christmas, they may not be financial. It's not the most lucrative time of the year for most of us. And we're now trying to get back onto an even keel after the spending in December. But the Magus asks us to step up and do something, and that may mean just working with the resources that we have already and getting creative with that kind of thing. So that may be, as I said, coming from outside to us, but it may also just be a sense of needing to create, needing to bring something out, and you may not be entirely sure what that is. And I would suggest that you don't really need to know what it is, because the whole idea of the Magus is that he is also the grand experimenter. He is not particularly interested in finding out things that he already knows. In other words, he is not there to verify things that have already been discovered, because coming as he does at the beginning of the major arcana, which, as I said, is that matter. It's the cards that inform our own movement through life, our inner and outer lives. He's starting with a blank slate, and that blank slate is the Fool that came before him. The Fool decides to shift and move and come into being, and then the Magus forms as a result of that. So yeah, the Magus isn't interested in double checking, verifying, redoing. He's not interested in reinventing the wheel. He's interested in trying something new. He's interested in seeing what his experimentations create. And I will often talk about the idea of an alchemist in the lab, or cooking in the kitchen. There's food alchemy. If you're trying to experiment with something, it can get a little bit messy, and we don't always end up with what it is that we hoped we would. Sometimes we end up with something where we have to clear up and start again. Sometimes we end up with what it is that we thought that we were going to have, and sometimes we end up with something different, but no less wonderful. And the Magus is really about that. It's being prepared to get messy in order to bring something through, because you are going very much on a sense of pioneering spirit. And that pioneering spirit suggests that you actually don't know what's around the corner. It's just that you're prepared to turn the corner to find out. And so if it feels risky, what you're doing, and I don't mean risky to life. It can feel risky doing something that you've never done before. It's no matter what that is. If it feels risky, if it feels, but you're feeling that sense of a pull towards doing something in spite of its being risky, then that is the pull of the magus. If you are given an offer that feels slightly out of your reach, that you may have to push yourself in a way that you hadn't anticipated, or doesn't feel that it takes you out of your comfort zone, then that's the magus as well. So there is very much a sense of striking out in a new direction without a map. So the magus will give you as much as you need for the next step, but will not necessarily give you anything further up the road. And that's the exciting part of the magus, and also sometimes the scary part. But I think that fear is underrated as a great motivator. So this is that pioneering spirit that we are going into in January, and it really does require our own sort of smarts, our own ability to tap in to our own integrity about this. You may have people coming up to you and saying, "What are you doing? You're crazy." Well, the magus doesn't rush into anything headlong without weighing the risks, but this is a risk that's worth taking. So once you've decided for yourself that you have a felt sense that there's something here that's worth pursuing, other people, well, people like to rain on parades a lot of the time. I think sometimes out of genuine concern for the consequences of our actions, and sometimes out of envy, sometimes out of jealousy. It's sometimes we don't want people to get ahead, because then that may mean that we might have to step up as well, and we don't want to do that. So somebody else mustn't do that as well, because then otherwise it's a risk, or it's a threat to our own sense of self and our own comfort. The magus is asking us to peel away that security blanket and do something. Go out and do something, or stay in and be something different. But it is a creative flair that you need. So that's really, so you've got these two cards here. And if you put them side by side, it's quite interesting, because the breast has turned into this light, the inspiration, the idea of the fact that the magus is being inspired by something else. The magus works with, when a magus is a true magus, not a conjurer or a sorcerer, the magus is aligned with a sense of integrity that stretches beyond his human form. Not that the magus as an archetype is human, but when we are aligned, or the magus is working through us, there is a connection to something greater. There is a sense of bringing something through rather than making something up, if you see what I mean. Very often, some of the greatest creative works are when people are asked how they came up with them. They very often will be reluctant to claim ownership of them, because it feels like they came through them rather than from them. And that's the magus. And so it's the sense of this, mother's milk, this breast that filled up. It's time to grow up. It's time to step away from that sense of being parented, being looked after by somebody else, where somebody else is spoon feeding, and rather take the inspiration from within this time and then shift forward. So the foundation is given, it's a very good foundation, but if you stay there, you stay with your safety blanket, your security blanket, you're staying there and you're not shifting into here. So there's the invitation. And the final card, in order to make the most of this, is the Knight of Wands. An absolutely perfect card to go with the magus. A very go-getting, doing card, and also a very human card. So we've got the whole spread here. We've got the first card at the 10 of Cups is the minor arcana, and it's one of the numbered cards, and then we've got a major in the magus, and now we have a court card in the Knight of Wands. I don't know if I said cups before. If I did, excuse me. I don't think I did. So the Knight of Wands, fire, creativity. The wands are the first suit in the minor arcana. They are the least tangible because it is that creative fire, hence that fire there. And the knight has it too. If you see the sort of flames licking up around him. And the knight in this deck, which is inspired by the Thoth deck, is the king. So it's not the Knight of Wands in the Waite-Smith deck. This is the king. So the Knight of Wands is the fiery yang energy of creation. As you can see here, I mean, you know, there's no bullshit about him. He's a go-getter, and he's going to do it. I mean, look at that fist. You know, he's about to go and act and do something. And what I like here, see the eye is drawn to that white space there in the center of the card. Why are there no flames there? I like to think about the fact that he's not consumed by the flames. He is very, very clearly just demarcating, or he's got boundaries. There is this very, very strong, boundaried, principled sense of space within the fire in order to do something. And that's what the knight has learned, is that is the boundary that is, this is what I'm going to do. It is not about being consumed by the thing that's inspiring you. And the knight is not consumed by the fire. He is of the fire, but not in the fire. And in that way, he creates space in order to be able to stay separate from his creation as well, and not to fully identify with it, but rather, because to fully identify with it is to be consumed by it, whereas to step back and create that sense of mental space is to be a master of it, like the magus is a master of magic. And the Knight of Wands is really the human incarnation. So the court cards are our personality. It's a particular aspect that's coming through. We are all the court cards all at the same time. However, there are certain court cards that will step forward and become more prevalent in who we are and how we're being in a particular moment in time. So this tool card is asking you to assume yang fire. So I'm reluctant to use masculine too much, because I think that people confuse that with male. And when I talk about masculine, I'm not. So I prefer to use the word yang, and that is active. It's active fire. It's not passive fire. So it's the difference between the aurora borealis, which is to me a sort of passive fire. It's reflective. It goes across the sky. It's far away. It is diffuse. Whereas active fire is a flame. It is a torch. It is a match. You know, it is the hearth. It is something that can burn, if you get too close, which is why the Knight of Wands is so principled and so boundaried, is that he knows all about that. You play with fire, you play with it safely, and he knows how to do that. So this is about adopting quite a fiery attitude towards things, a very active, outward focused, extroverted way of doing things. Decision making is part of it, calling the shots is part of it. It's more about giving orders than taking them. So, but the Knight of Wands knows how to give and take with that, because otherwise, if you're simply giving orders all the time, and often then for the sake of it, you become a tyrant rather than a king. So there's something here about adopting a stance that is warrior-like through the next 4 weeks. And it's actually in very, very stark contrast then to the breast. And in fact, so you've got this transition from the breast to this light, to this fire. It's like it's an increasing sort of sense of one's own personal agency and creativity. And the kid has finally grown up in that particular way. So the foundation gives way to a very active form of ruling something. And when I say ruling, it could be starting up a business, like I was saying. It could be making a decision within a group of people. It could simply be about taking control of your life, possibly for the first time, about taking charge, about not not slipping back into that very fluid cup-like sort of liquid. And if you think of water, it gives way, it ebbs, it flows, but rather it is incredibly active. It's disciplined. It doesn't just wash around things. It creates its own path. And there's, it's good to bear in mind when we look at the metaphor of fire, and then to know what's going on in the rest of the world, just how damaging fire can be if it is not managed and controlled properly, and if it gets out of hand. So it's really about being able to burn from within without burning everything out around you, burning others, burning yourself. But something about burning from within and being able to harness that sense of fiery creativity. So this is not so much an intellectual pursuit. I'm not saying that thoughts don't come into it. Obviously thoughts come into it, but this is not a sitting down, studying, reading books kind of pursuit for its own sake. It is not an intellectual process for its own sake. The intellect must be in service to creativity. So the knight has all of the qualities in him. He's got the intellect, he's got material abilities to do things, he's got the emotions, but mainly he's the fire starter. So it's just, what kind of fire starter are you going to be? What kind of fire tender are you going to be? What can you create from fire? Fire is the most creative thing. It can also be incredibly destructive. So here's your tool, your box of matches. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to make out of the foundation of shifting away from this full up, and shifting away from this sense of being nurtured by a presence that is incredibly mothering, but may also keep you too close. In other words, it stops you from seeking out your own entrepreneurial independence, and there's the magus. It is entrepreneurial independence. It is about grabbing something with both hands and fashioning something with that and forging it in the flames of what is coming up from inside you. And I will leave it as vague as that, simply because when I spoke about the reading at the beginning, I encourage you to adopt a sort of magus-like approach to the readings that I do. In other words, they are possibly another tool in your toolbox, but ultimately you know what it is that you're building, and you're the one with the wisdom to know how to do that. And if you don't have the wisdom to do that, you have the creative flair and entrepreneurial spirit to go out and find out more about it, or to do what it is that you need to do to bring what you need to bring through. But for the time being, I'm going to leave you with this, because it is an incredibly powerful reading. And I wish you all the very best in your creative endeavors for the next 4 weeks, and I will speak to you next month. Goodbye.